Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back after lunch. The time to sit back, relax, and fall asleep. I hope not. This recovering from major leadership failure. This presentation will be a little bit different. My name is Dawid Ostręga, because I'm not necessarily going to talk about the fact of how wonderful I am. This seems to be a bit of a tendency at a lot of conferences. We come up here or down here and we say how great we are. Because I've noticed when I'm in the audience, sometimes I start almost getting depressed, thinking, wow, everybody's so amazing. And I keep failing. So I want to share those failures because I think we can learn a lot more from failures than from successes. So obviously I'm going to tell you how this all finished up, but the major one is that failure. So a few things about me, some background so you know who I am, why I'm here. Nice little picture. Do you know who this is? Bob the Builder, exactly, Bob the Builder. I've been kind of thinking, well, what's the best way to introduce myself? And yes, I guess that's what I am. That's kind of the major thing that I've been doing, both in my private life, my let's call it charity life, and in professional life. Building teams has been at the forefront of what I'm doing from very early days. Building a scout troop, building sports teams, building companies. On a professional level, these are some of the companies I've worked at. You've probably heard of them, EPAM Systems. Yes, that's my fault. If anybody doesn't like that company, I was the very first employee. I set up EPAM Systems here in Poland. For IBM, I did the biggest project that IBM had at the time in Europe. Built a team for them internally, which now is nearly 1,000 people. SolarWinds, I also set that up. I was the operations director, one of the first employees building that center. For Amazon, I worked on their Alexa, the big team in Gdańsk. That team is about 300-400 people. And yes, if you ask whether Alexa records everything, yes, she does record everything, and yes, everything is analyzed. As long as the keyword is said. If the keyword is not said, then in theory she shouldn't record. So I can tell you a few secrets about that. And now I'm working for Shell Energy, heading up their center here in Krakow, the technology center. So as you can already see, sort of building has been my thing, working with teams, building teams in companies. The thing I'm going to focus a little bit more on today is this, Krakow Kings. My other life, my second life, I'm a head coach of the Krakow Kings, American football team here in Krakow. So this is me in front of some of my players. Yes, we do have American football here in Poland. Why American football? Why do I do it? I played. I played for 8 years. I played at the international level. Then I got a scholarship. I went over to the States. And I joked that I taught Americans their own sport. But the benefit that it's given me, it's allowed me to have part of my education in the States and also a big part of my professional life in the States. So I've seen different places, different ways of building teams, of managing teams and setting things up. East Coast and West Coast is very different. England is very different. Europe is very different. Western and Eastern Europe are very different. So I've been very lucky that I've worked in a lot of these places and I've seen these things. But when I came back to Poland, I decided that I wanted to share my knowledge of this sport because I think it's the ultimate team sport and be the head coach of the Krakow Kings. So this is a real picture of the team. As you can see, the logo is the same as the logo I'm wearing here. This picture happened to be taken at the national final 4 years ago in Gdynia when we happened to beat the Seahawks, who's the team in yellow. Ultimate team sport where one person cannot win the game. So all lessons in sport, especially in American football, are very, very relevant to the things that we do in business. That's why I love to talk about what we do in sport and the lessons that I learned from sport and into business, because they're so relevant. And I use both. You know, when I'm coaching, there are things that I bring in from business and vice versa. So this is what it led to. This is a big success. I lied a little bit that I wasn't going to talk about successes because I've had some success, but that's not the major reason for this. I took over the team, and in the second year we got the national championship, and this is a picture of us celebrating winning the championship. But that's not the real meat of why we're talking. This is the real meat of this presentation. Yeah, it's not the top. Keep going, way down here. Krakow Kings, 4th place. This is the year after the championship. The year, it exactly the same players, but because nothing changed. I didn't have any major injuries. I can't, as a coach, say, oh, we had a hospital within our team, we had a terrible time, everybody was injured. No, I had the same players. Everything was the same. Our opposition was pretty much the same. The league didn't really change. And the year after the championship, this is what happened to us. Out of 8 games, we only won 3 games and lost 5. And we nearly got relegated to the 2nd division. Why? Because of me. My fault. Okay? And it's not something that I did. It's more something that I didn't do. And that's the biggest takeaway I hope that you take from this presentation is the mistake that I made is I thought that if it worked once, it's going to work again. And I thought, let's do exactly the same thing. So this picture kind of underlines what happened to us. That's how our season felt. It was difficult, it was tiring, it was uphill struggle, where in the previous year everything seemed to be going well. Suddenly a lot of personal issues started coming about. Because one thing that we need to remember is that success and winning pastes over any issues that we have. Okay, if there are issues between individuals in a team, and not just in sports teams, in business as well, as long as the project is going well, there are no real issues. It's when there is some kind of a delivery failure, that's when the personal issues start coming out. Okay. This picture is the one that I really hope you remember, because when most people see this picture, they kind of think, great, unity, right? These are the 4 captains that are walking onto the field, and they're showing real unity. They're all holding hands. They're showing that they're a team, they're together, and they're going out at the beginning of the game for the coin toss. It's a real inspirational thing. There are captains in the most manly of sports, which is American football. They're holding hands because of the unison. Well, in fact, this is one of the most painful pictures for me. And to explain why, I have to go back a little bit to the history of the team. When I took over the team had no history or tradition of winning. There had been 2 teams in Krakow, none of them ever won anything. When the 2 teams merged, they asked me to become coach. So I asked them, why do you want me to be a coach? They kind of weren't sure. I said, well, I'll only be coach if you want to win, because I'm about winning, about building a culture of winning. So I said, yes, absolutely, that's what we want to do. So I said to them, if you listen to me, if you do exactly what I tell you and follow my instructions, we will win a championship. Maybe in the first year, if not in the first year, in the second year, we will win a championship. And the team bought into that. I gave them some examples of what we're going to do, and the team did that. They did exactly what I wanted them to do, and we won a championship. So I was the leader, the person that drove the team. Now, the mistake that I made is in that year after the championship, I was no longer enough. The team needed more. The team needed more leadership within the team. And this, the 4 captains, this was their only responsibility as captains during that year. To go out at the beginning of the game for the coin toss and come back. What's the point? That's not a captain. That's just a pretty looking person coming in for a picture, for a motivational picture like this. That's not leadership. In the first 2 years, I was that leader. I was the person that was driving the team, because that's what the team needed. Because they didn't have a history or a culture of winning, so they needed somebody to really drive it home. The year after we won, okay, everybody got a little bit better. Every single time we played against one of the teams, for them it was the final because they wanted to beat the champion. But that's not the reason why we lost. The reason everything went forward and the players needed more. There's 65 players on a team. I couldn't be everywhere. And bear in mind that this isn't my full-time job. This is just my hobby. This is what I do in the evening. We train 3 times a week, but I couldn't be in every single gym. I couldn't go to the 20 different gyms that the players attend to make sure that they're working out. Yes, I could put certain things in place to make sure that they're working out, but bottom line, they had to find the motivation themselves. And in the first 2 years, I was enough, but in that third year, I didn't realize early enough that what they needed is internal motivation from themselves. I needed to give a lot more responsibility to these players. So I look at this picture with great pain because it keeps on reminding me that that's where I failed my team. I should have given a lot more to these guys. And the reason why we didn't succeed is because I just let them be these figureheads instead of real captains. So moving forward, what did I do? And this is my absolute favorite picture. And my players always laugh at me that I show this at any opportunity I have. This defines what we did, or the culture change that we had within the team, where the players started supporting each other. The players became the leaders. It allowed me and my assistant coach to step back a little bit. We no longer had to be the motivation. We no longer had to be everywhere making sure that the players did things. Now it was up to them to motivate each other. And this picture is actually a real-life incident, and I'll tell you about it because it's a very powerful story. This player here on the left, his name's Dawid. His job is to catch the ball. So he sort of runs downfield, the ball is thrown, and he catches the ball. It's a little bit more difficult than it sounds, believe me. The problem that he had is if he dropped that ball at the beginning of the game, if he dropped that first one, we could pretty much forget about him for the rest of the game. He would drop the second, the third, the fourth, and he was out. Incredibly talented player. In practice, he was brilliant. He caught everything, every ball. He was everywhere. He was an inspiration to others. But in the game, if that first one didn't go right, or the second one, then we had a problem. I tried everything. I tried shouting at him. I tried hugging him. I tried talking to him. I just tried absolutely everything I could. All the years of experience that I've had in business, in scouting, and in sports, in order to motivate him, somehow I couldn't get through to him. There's nothing I could do. And before one of the games, this guy here in the helmet came up to me and said, "Coach, can I just take Dawid aside and talk to him before the game?" Because the players knew this. They knew that if he didn't catch that first ball, then we could forget about him. And he was a major weapon. So I said, "Go ahead, whatever you can do. You know, I've tried everything." And what he did is he took him to the practice field, which was right next to the stadium where we played. And just the two of them, and he took a ball, and he just threw him the ball. And obviously Dawid caught it. We threw him another one, and he caught it. I said, "Dawid, look, in practice, at this field, you catch everything." He goes, "Yeah, I do." So what's the difference between this field and that field over there? It's just 100 yards. You can do this, right? Best game he had. Didn't drop a ball. Since that moment, this guy has never had a problem in not catching balls. Even if he now drops the first ball in the game, it makes absolutely no difference. That was the pivotal moment that changed something within him. And it wasn't me. I'd love to take the credit that it was me, but I couldn't do it. It had to be one of his peers that made that difference. The only thing I did is enable this situation. And that's our responsibility as leaders, to enable something like this, to enable people within our organization, within our team, to help each other. That we don't just look and say, "Well, what am I supposed to do now?" We support each other. We want a situation in which anybody from the team fills a gap, sees that there's an opportunity to help somebody else, and just simply does it. Because it becomes this powerful situation where it drives success. Because nothing I could have done would have made a difference with Dawid. It was one of his peers. And building that culture, suddenly the captains took on real, true leadership roles. They became truly captains. And it wasn't the case that I went to the captain and said, "Do this," or that I stopped talking to the players. No, it's just simply they understood behind the scenes, the places that I wasn't, they were my eyes and ears, or they were the leadership aspect that needed to be in the places that the coaches couldn't be. The players started motivating each other. An incredible moment, I remember, I put together an Excel spreadsheet for the players to fill in which gyms they were going to when they were working out, just so that the coaches could go in and help them out if they wanted to work on their technique, as how they're lifting weights and so on. Another incredible thing that came about from that, they started then asking each other questions like, why haven't you filled this sheet? When do you go to the gym? How comes you don't go to the gym? It wasn't the coaches saying, go to the gym. It was the players that themselves started realizing that if we want to be a success, we all have to pitch in. We all have to do this together. And they started positively pressuring each other. And then they started saying, okay, let's put in a system where we go in pairs. It's difficult to go on your own. Let's make sure. And this idea came out from them, that it became a buddy system in order to go to the gym together to motivate each other. And all because I allowed the leadership to be passed on to the members of the organization instead of just doing it myself. Now, please don't misunderstand me. What I did in the first 2 years was correct. It was needed. If I tried to do that internal leadership for the captains in the first 2 years, it would have completely failed because there was no culture of winning. It was I kind of joked that it was a Facebook team. It was the reason why they were playing American football is just to put a picture of themselves in a kit, put it on Facebook, say, "Oh, look, I play American football." This weird thing. They needed a change of culture, and the only way it could have been done is by somebody that's been there, that's done it, that has championship themselves. But that energy and that power ran out, and that needed to be changed. And I kicked myself that I didn't see it early enough, that it took a loss, a really tough season, in order for us to come back. But I changed it. So what are the most important? And this was the result. Okay, it worked. We go back to the championship with exactly the same team, with the same players, same team. We go back to the championship. Okay, so now the crucial things and how does this apply to your everyday life, and what are the key takeaways? Because that's another crucial thing. When you walk out of here, I want you to just remember 3 things. Okay, not 10, not 50, just 3 things that I hope you get to implement in your everyday life. The first one is scale the agile retrospective. From the things that I've said, doesn't this sound familiar? We deliver a sprint, then we sit down and we analyze, right? We look at what did we do right, what do we like, what do we want to continue, and what do we want to change. It's already there. It's just appreciate the fact that this doesn't have to be just in the agile sprint. We can take this further. Any project that you do should be done this way. When you finish the project, before you move on to the next one, let's analyze the previous one, and let's make sure that we learn from it, both as if it was a success and if it was a failure, so that the next one can be a success. The second point, understand how you achieved your success. Do not underestimate this. Just because something went well, don't just say, oh, great, let's just do the same. No. Really, truly look at why this particular delivery was a success. What did we do in order to make it successful? Because if you don't understand, then you might implement something incorrectly moving forward. And also in a failure, it's exactly the same thing. Not every single delivery, not every single project is a success. So analyze both the failures and the successes so you really truly can move forward with your eyes open. Because you don't want to go in blindly. One of the feedback is a very, very important thing in both directions, both positive and negative feedback. I always tell people I need to hear both the good things and the bad things, because if I don't hear what went well, then I might think that needs to be changed, when in fact that was a very good thing. Bad things I need to hear about to make sure that I can fix them and they don't happen again. So it's very important to understand how you achieve success. It's a crucial one. And the last one is look in the mirror. And that's probably the toughest thing. Very often we want to look at somebody else, point to somebody else, and blame somebody else. First thing is look at yourself. I was at one of the talks earlier on, and the presenter said, "Did I give this information correctly? Did the team go ahead and do the exercise properly? Was it my fault, or was it the team's fault that the communication wasn't in place?" And he basically mentioned that there's 2 ways of looking at things. There's one, well, I am where I am, and that's the fault of other people. Or I am where I am because that's where I've put myself. In my view, in true leadership, you need to have control of that, and you need to think, I am where I am because of where I've put myself, and I need to make sure that the onus on the communication is with the team is on me, not on a team. In the first 2 years, the feedback, can you imagine what the feedback was like from my players in the first 2 years? When I was the main leader, the person that drove everything forward, and I said, if you listen to everything that I tell you, we're going to win a championship. Picture, if you're in that situation and you're bought into that, and then I ask you for feedback, you think you're going to give me honest feedback that something's not going well? I didn't create a culture of feedback, a culture of collaboration. I said, do what I tell you. Okay? So I can't blame the team at that point for not telling me if something's not going right, because I didn't really allow them. I might use a word like, oh, I want to hear what your opinion is. Not really. Because from day one, everything I've done is to show, just follow what I'm telling you, and it will be a success. That wasn't a bad thing. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. In every project is different, every team is different, every delivery is different. And we need to change and apply appropriate tools for that success. The team needed a strong leader to follow, to change the direction in the first 2 years. But then I made the mistake of not changing fast enough to pass the baton on and let them lead the team themselves. And another honest thing that I'm going to tell you right now, which I wasn't actually planning to, but I like to work in an agile way. I went a little bit too far with passing on the leadership of the team to the players. I decided to, because it worked so well, I thought, well, let me try a social experiment. Let me see how far this can go, and whether I can almost truly step back and really put the power in the players' hands. That's a tough lesson that I learned that didn't really succeed, because the players ended up pushing me out, because they decided that because I gave them so much freedom in deciding which direction to take, when I tried to rein that back in, they were no longer interested. One of the very small things that I always made sure that I implemented is a dress code. We always made sure that whenever you come to practice, you wear the appropriate dress code. So you always had a practice shirt. Whenever we went to games, you always wore a shirt with a team logo or a cap with a team logo. And they didn't quite understand it. To them, it was a burden. They had to make sure, we always have to wear the team stuff. And they didn't quite understand why, even though I tried to explain to them that that's what builds a team. So when I started relaxing things, and so one of the things I allowed them to do is I said, captains decide what dress code we're going to have for the games. So suddenly they started relaxing that dress code. And suddenly, let's just jeans and any T-shirt. We stopped looking like a team. So then when I tried to rein that back in, they felt that ownership. No, you no longer tell us what to do. This is our team. We do whatever we want. Okay, so I went a little bit too far. So if any of you are in sports, don't let go of your team too much. Okay, so that's another lesson that I've learned. You need to always be conscious of your decisions and where those decisions are going to lead. One of the major things I always say is, don't ask for someone's opinion if you don't want to hear it. Okay? Because it's very frustrating when somebody asks you your opinion, you give them their opinion, and they just completely ignore it. Right? And even more painful if somebody gives you that opinion and it hurts. And what, you're going to start being annoyed because they gave that opinion. Well, you asked for it, so I told you. Okay? So be very careful, and only ask for that opinion if you're prepared to act on it. I handed over the control of the team, more leadership to the team, because I was prepared for that, and I believed that we needed that, and it got us back to the championship. But the problem was, once we got that second championship, then the players didn't understand that now the onus is even more on them, that they had to work even harder. They made the same mistake which I made. They thought, if you just do exactly the same thing, we're going to win again. This was no longer my problem, because I handed over the team to the next coach and he had to deal with it. But it was a lesson that unfortunately they didn't learn, because the coach that handed it over was one of the players. he basically decided to retire and moved into that position. I thought he was ready, and I really thought he understood, but he wasn't strong enough to rein that control back in either, because we allowed it to go a little bit too far. But anyway, going back to the most important things, and these are the key takeaways that I really hope you remember from this presentation. In any project, in any delivery, whenever we finish, scale the agile retrospective. Remember to analyze, talk to the team, and this is at any size. This doesn't have to be just a development team. This can be, no matter how high in the organization you go, no matter how big the project, this is exactly the same thing. And also in your personal lives, whatever you do in your personal lives, same thing with this conference. The organizers of this conference, I truly believe they should sit down at the end of the conference and, okay, let's analyze what happened, what we did well, what we should change. So this scales everywhere. So remember, very important thing, scale the agile perspective, understand why this was a success, why did people come to this conference, why they wanted to be here, and what do we do in order for them to make sure they come back next year. And we have to be careful. Will you come back to this conference next year if everything is exactly the same? I don't know. If I come back next year with exactly the same talk, will you want to come and listen to me? Probably not. Been there, done that. You've heard about it. Now you want to hear about the next thing. You probably want to hear about what I'm doing with the junior team and building the success that I'm building with them and the future and the lessons and how different it is to work with kids as opposed to adults. A lot tougher, trust me. And the look in the mirror. That one is the most important one. Could I have done something different? Did I do the right things? Did I communicate in the right way? Did they hear what I thought that they heard? Because just because I said X and Y, that doesn't mean that's what the team heard. And I suppose one more thing that I always like to try and remind people, please don't ever ask a question, do you understand? Because the answer, yes, does not mean anything at all. Okay? So always try to change that into, what did you understand? Please tell me in your own words what it was. And that's a very, very crucial thing. And I'm learning that even more with my young players now, because I'm working with a junior team. They'll always tell me, yes, I understand. Really have to make sure that I communicate the right way and ask them, what do they understand? And what the task actually is. So that was it. That was my major failure. It hurt real bad. I'm very disappointed that it took a year for me to learn, but I'm glad that I did learn. And now I truly implement this in every single thing that I do. No matter how small or how big a project, I always think about why was it a success, why did it go well, and what can I do next time to make sure that it's even better. Okay, we've got a little bit of time for questions, but before we move to questions, I have a huge favor to ask of you. Now's the time to take out your phones. Probably been itching, can I grab my phone? If you could just simply give me your feedback. I'd love to hear from you what you thought about this presentation. Was it useful? Literally 4 questions. I think 5 questions will take you about 30 seconds to do. You can either take a picture of the QR code or pretty simple URL to remember, tinyurl.com/Mobiconf. It's important to me that I hear your feedback and what you thought about this in order that I can make this even better in the future. Okay? Thank you very much. And now we have some time for questions. So, offering to the floor for any questions that you may have. Thank you. Yes, we have one question.
Hey, thank you for an amazing presentation. I would like to ask you, what are the symptoms of going too far? Because you said that you learn in a while, but how to prevent that?
Yeah, it's basically it became a lot more difficult to, how do I say this in a nice way, to get the team to do what I wanted them to do. Suddenly it was no longer enough for me to say, we're doing this. Now, because they felt ownership, I had to convince them. And it just took so much longer. Now, that's not a bad thing. Getting people's buy-in is awesome. People will always be a lot more engaged if they have their buy-in, if they understand why we're doing it. But, and there's a saying in the army, when the command goes duck, there's no time to say, oh, well, because you've been shot. Too late. You need to duck. You need to duck and ask questions. And we're so limited in time in sports and in the amount of time we have in practice and preparing for games that I just felt I didn't have the time to explain every single decision to the players. I needed them to trust a little bit more, and just if I say it, then they just did. Even though they knew me for many years, but once they felt that empowerment, they felt it was okay to challenge every single decision that I made, and it just took a lot longer and a lot more patience in order to explain that to them. In the world of sports, I don't think that works. I think in the world of business, it does. Majority of the time, you do have time to explain these things because the deadlines are not as tight. You know, we're talking about we had 3 hours of practice, 3 practice sessions a week of 2 hours apiece. That's only 6 hours of practice, preparing for our games. That's such a short amount of time. In the workplace, you've got a lot more time to sit down and get people's buy-in.
I have a question. You mentioned that your players took over this leadership. My question is, if you asked them to take this control, or they just felt it, that it's time to take the leadership?
After the bad season, I did sort of my own retrospective and analyzed what happened. And when I decided the reason was because of the lack of leadership from them, what I did is I sat down. I chose a number of players. And I did something which I called an internal leadership program. Not just the 4 captains, because that's pretty obvious who those leaders were, but I also looked at, there were in total 8 other players who I felt were leaders, all with leadership potential in the team. Now, bear in mind, these might sound like high numbers. There is 65 players on the team. So 12 is not a huge number, 12 leaders. But without announcing it to the team, I created a leadership program for them. So I took them aside. I did some lessons with them. I sent them on some training, some normal business trainings, more leadership trainings. The kind of lessons that, please don't think this as a major plug, but what Leaders Ireland does. Leaders Ireland has a program for young managers. And it's that type of course that I sent them on. Plus, I explained to them why we were doing it. Some of them didn't quite understand, didn't really want to do that. Like one of them said, look, I don't want to be a leader. I said, it's not about you being a leader straight away. You're not ready right now, but you have potential to be leaders. And I also explained to them that I was doing this not just for the team. I was doing it for them individually. Because if they become leaders or learn about leadership aspects within the team, they will take those lessons into their professional lives. So this was simply part of their education and making them better as people. Because that's ultimately why I do this. It's not about the sports accolades. I've won my personal championships, so I don't need to win more championships. I want these people to be better individuals. So I made them understand that for the team to move forward, they need to take ownership. But I didn't just throw it onto them. I prepared them. I gave them those lessons so they knew what kind of things they would have to do. But what was important, I didn't nominate them as leaders, because I felt that would have not worked. I didn't say, you, and you are the leaders. And no, I asked them not to talk about these meetings. These things were not part of practice. They were completely separate, because I wanted the rest of the team to realize that they were leaders simply through their actions.
I guess it's for the recording, so. Once you did hand over a bit more control to some of your leaders and found that they were getting pushback, what would you suggest as a way to kind of rein that back in? Not necessarily rein it in, but would you think there was a good way to carry on working with those people without them giving too much pushback or it being kind of making your job harder?
That's an awesome question. That becomes now my problem. Because I cannot tell them, give them that ownership, and suddenly take it back and rein it back. I need to change the way I work. And this is what I mentioned. If you ask for someone's opinion, make sure that you want to hear it. If I open up Pandora's box and I let them have their leadership, I need to understand And I previously loved to have control. It's a lot easier to have all the control. It's a lot easier to run a team when you decide from A to B. Now suddenly they were making these decisions. So I had to adapt. I had to make sure that I found ways to get more information, find out what they're doing, find out what they're planning, without them having a feeling that daddy's looking over them and them not being true leaders. This I learned from one of the first leaders in my life. I took over a scout troop when I was 14 years old. And I had a mentor who basically was at every single scout meeting making sure that I didn't do anything silly. At no point did I feel he was there to tell me what to do. He made me feel that I was the leader. At 14 years old, what did I know about leadership and leading a scout troop at 14? Especially taking kids to a forest for 2 weeks. But he was close enough to just gently guide me in the right direction, but not stand over me making me think that he really was pulling all the strings and I was just a puppet. So this was what I had to do. I had to make sure that I was in the right place to find out that we're going in the right direction, but really giving the ownership to them. At that point, the work becomes on you. It becomes a lot more difficult. Trust me, given that, as most of you know, delegating is so difficult. Because most of us feel that we can do things better ourselves. It's so much easier. By the time I teach them, I'll do it myself. No, you got to really let them do it. Let them trust the process. Trust that what you've put in place over the years, that they'll really will make use of, and they will make mistakes. That's just life. But it's just making sure that they do make mistakes, and they're not scared to make mistakes. Because that's another mistake I made at one point, where the players were so scared to make mistakes that they weren't playing to their full potential. So I had to change that a little bit and really free them up. Say, look, it's okay to make a mistake. It's just we need to learn from it really quickly.